I've been using Ableton for about over a year now. You may have seen me use it in some of my how-to tutorials. I still love FL Studio, but Ableton offers a different workflow you may find more suitable for the project you're working on. They both have positives, so let us all just please live in harmony. In this video, I'll start talking about the workflow tips and tricks I implement when using Ableton, my templates, my custom setup, and work towards more advanced techniques. You'll hear me call Live Ableton sometimes. I know Ableton is the name of the company, and Live is the program, but a lot of people just call the program Ableton anyways, so just a heads up. Let's start off with one of my first problems I ever had with Ableton. It's that when you have a MIDI clip selected, every time you press the spacebar, it replays from the beginning of the clip, even when you click somewhere else on the grid. But fortunately, I learned that if you hold down Control while pressing space, then you can play from wherever the marker is. Be warned, if you make a selection, then it will stop at the end of that selection, so that's just something to be aware of. While we're in the piano roll, something I missed was the ability to preview chords and notes by Alt plus right-clicking in FL Studio. That's so good. It doesn't exist in Ableton, however, but there is a blue headphone button. When it's on, you can hear the notes when you select them. Better yet, you can select the whole chord in the velocity box. You can also select notes through the keyboard on the side. This is handy when writing drum patterns. You might know that the velocity of selected notes can be turned down using the Alt key, but when creating a note, if you double click and keep the mouse button held down, you'll be able to change the velocity at the same time, and hold down Control to make these little velocity ramps. Control D is for duplicate, which makes a lot more sense than FL Studio, where you use Control B for duplicate. Although, in Ableton, Control Q is not quantize, but quit. Not really the two things you want to be getting confused with each other. Make a selection and then hit Control I to insert silence, the exact length of the selection you just made. So if you select 2 bars, then 2 empty bars will get inserted. Hold down Shift to make precise value changes. This also works for automation. Having that note preview button always on can be sometimes annoying, especially when you make a lot of selections. So I map this to a key and I can quickly turn it on and off. Freezing is totally cool and all, but did you know that you can not only still copy the MIDI, but the frozen audio as well, and even mute them? That's 0 to mute, which I use a lot. By default, audio fades are automatically created, so say goodbye to drum transients if you drag them in. I've had to warn multiple students about this, and I really don't think it should be on by default, so I would turn that off now. Well, after this video. Then turn it off. New in Ableton 10 is the ability to hold down Alt and scroll up and down to resize the tracks, which I find myself using it as a quick way to open and close tracks. This also works with multiple selected tracks. Another new trick is the ability to stretch audio files. Just say, Alexa, stretch these loops. Nothing happened. Oh, I guess they must have patched that then. Well, anyways, you can turn on warp mode and then hold down Shift and drag the edges. Very useful for quickly fitting loops to the grid, as long as they're like the perfect length. Additionally, holding down Alt will let you go off the grid. And this is the case when holding down Alt for most things, like MIDI notes and automation. You can drag a sample from the browser or arrangement straight into an empty MIDI track, and it will make it simpler for the sample. If you drag a selection of a sample, then that's the part of the sample it will play. In FL Studio, there's this neat button that mutes all the plugins on the channel. In Ableton, to do this, you can either select all the plugins, Control A, or make a group. The nice thing about the group is that it remembers what was turned off. There's discussion between using audio or MIDI for drums. I use MIDI, but I have legit good reasons. So you got all your drums and already arranged them, but you decide, you don't like that kick. It just doesn't work in the mix. Well, now you gotta go and replace all those kick samples. That's a lot of work. But hey, wait. Dylan. All you need to do is just go to the file manager and replace the sample. Yes, that can work, unless you have the perfect kick, but it has a bit of silence in the beginning for some reason, and then you still gotta go and go fix them. See, if this was a MIDI, that's not a problem. Not only is it really easy to swap out samples, but you can also move the start times and shape the sounds using the filter and ADSR envelope settings. Furthermore, I like to group these samples. Why? Because if you select this button, it will show you your chains. Here's the sample we already have, but then you can select a whole bunch more samples. They'll all play at once, but if you press solo, you'll only hear one. I find this a cool way to audition samples and hear how they sound with everything else in the mix. This is also a neat way of layering samples, plus combining that with the filter and the volume envelopes, and even the fact that you can put effects on each sample individually opens up a lot of possibilities on how you want to shape and layer your sounds. I'll do this chain additioning trick with synths as well. You can group it and duplicate that chain and continue working on it. This way you can compare it with your old sound and hear if it feels better or worse, just in case you entirely mess up your sound. You can also just duplicate the whole track, but I find swapping between these chains quicker than having to turn one off and then the other on and then back on and off just to compare them.
However,
since automation doesn't copy over when you duplicate a chain, you can just copy the old synth and replace it. But still, Ableton, please fix. Now here's a cool trick I use for sidechaining. Some people might use their kick sample as the sidechain input, which doesn't always give you the most control, especially if you have a big fat kick sample. Other, more advanced people may use a separate sidechain input on a different channel, so they can use a different shorter sample. They'll mute that track, but it will still go to the sidechain. But the true patricians, they will group the sample just like I showed previously, but put in their sidechain input there and mute it so it can't be heard. Now, when I go to the compressor and go to that drum track, I can go into the sub menu, which allows me to select each individual chain. If I select the pre-effects version, I'll get the audio of that sidechain input before it's even been muted. You won't hear it, but it still gets used for that sidechain. Now when a kick plays, the sidechain will trigger using a nice clean input, so when I move one kick, I won't have to move the sidechain track as well every time I reposition the drums. You can also add an external instrument, which will send MIDI to LFO Tool or Shaperbox if you'd prefer to use that. I like using reference tracks to check my mixes. The problem is that if I'm using a master chain, then the reference tracks will go through that too, getting additional compression or limiting, so you have to turn that on and off. But if I set the output to external out, then it'll bypass that master chain entirely. You'll still hear it though, so it works well for reference tracks. One thing I love about Ableton is how easy it is to save ideas. If I have a MIDI clip, I can drag this into the browser to save it. Not only does it save the MIDI, but that synth sound, the automation, and effects will all save along with it, making it super easy to save a specific idea and bring it into another project later. And this doesn't just go for clips, but tracks and entire groups. Groups and groups? Yeah. That's not the only way you can literally drag a project file into the one you already have opened, but for a more nuanced approach, you can open an ASL file in the Ableton browser. You'll be able to see all the individual tracks and groups and drag them in. It's times like this I actually wish I named things properly though.
nah.
Let's move on to some things I have set to default. When I make a new MIDI track, it always starts with this pitch MIDI device. This allows me to quickly move up all the MIDI up or down an octave without having to mess with each individual clip or even go into the synth. So that's pretty nice. If you right click on your track, you can set it as your default track. This works for audio and MIDI tracks. OTT is, surprise, surprise, my most used multi-band dynamic preset. So that's the one I have by default every time I load it in. Have you ever had an effect that doesn't have an actual dry, wet knob, like Redux, for instance? Or maybe you have a series of effects you wish you could all mix in at once. Well, my default audio effect rack has two chains. One is the dry signal, and the other is the wet signal. It's empty when I load it in, but if you go to the chain selector, we can give each chain a zone. So when the selector is above that zone, that's the one you'll hear. But if we spread these out, we can create a fade between them so that selector essentially crossfades between no effect and the effect version. So now we've made our own dry wet knob. Do you not like when Ableton makes these ASD files? If you go to Preferences, File Folder, and turn Create Analysis Files off, then it won't make any more of those. But Live will have to reanalyze the files all over again, so you might need to wait a bit after opening a project up. Did you know you can enable and disable extra features in the options text file? If you don't have one, you can just make it yourself. There's a list of things you can add here. These are the ones I use. Rewire master off, so I can have multiple DAWs open without them trying to connect with each other. Enable ARM on selection, so whatever track I have selected, I can automatically play with my keyboard without having to hit the ARM button again. Enable map to siblings, which allows me to map all the same values to one macro knob, although I hardly ever do this. And show device slots, which lets you see the plugins in session view, even turn them off, but this may be buggy, so be warned. Some things that bother me that hopefully will get addressed. You know that really cool Control plus space trick I showed earlier? That doesn't work when you have multiple clips selected. I think this is just an oversight though, so that's unfortunate. Ableton, please fix. Then you have the infamous pitch bend bug. Essentially, whenever you have a pitch bend that doesn't return to 0, it stays pitch bent, so the sound can easily go off key. Ew. There's ways of preventing this though. When drawing pitch bends, make sure that the line returns to the center so that it can reset. This will be enough when playing it back. But say you want to stop the track in the middle of a pitch bend and then play a different clip, it'll be stuck at where it was. It will only ever change again if it comes across another pitch bend. So what I end up doing is drawing like a little minuscule pitch bend at the beginning of a clip, and you're not even going to hear that, but it will reset it. Also, if any synths have a pitch bend wheel built in, then I'll just use that in the automation mode. Okay, onto the scripts now. This is where the fun really begins. If you've seen my How to FL Studio, at the end, I talk about my auto hotkey script, and coming to Ableton, there was a whole bunch of stuff I wish I could do, but just couldn't. So I started making a new auto hotkey script and added a bunch of stuff. Then I showed it off to Inverted Silence of Tasty Night Owl, and since his involvement, it has evolved into something much more. He basically rewrote the entire script. So drum roll please. Now introducing
The Live Enhancement Suite.
Multiple people have spent countless hours testing the script. The great thing about the script is that it's also available as a regular exe file, so you don't even need AutoHotkey installed, you just download this and run it, and it should also work in both Ableton 9 and 10. Big warning, however, AutoHotkey is only for Windows. I will be showing a script for Mac that's really good, but this Ableton Enhancement Suite won't be one of them. Okay, so because we made this exe, it's most likely your antivirus will be like, hey, they're gonna try and stop you from using this awesomeness, but trust me, it's not a virus. And don't take my word for it. Listen to what these artists had to say about
The Live Enhancement Suite.
Fuck that. That's it.
What's up, guys? I'm Jaren. I approve the Live Enhancement Suite.
Yo, thank you so much to Dylan, Tall Chief, and Inverted Silence for hacking my Ableton.
Dope. Seriously, stellar work. You've managed to improve Ableton.
You're an absolute legend. Gonna save me so much time. This is actually fucking nuts. It's crazy.
First time starting it up, it will ask you if you want to add it to the startup, so you don't need to click on this each time you turn on your computer. You'll have to put it into an empty folder, by the way, because it makes some extra files you'll want to use. The first simple shortcut we made is to be able to use the middle mouse button to drag the screen around instead of using Control and Alt. Also, why is it Control Y to redo on Windows? I don't know why, but we remapped it to Shift Control Z instead. Pressing Control Alt Space allows you to instantly save the project as a new version. Now with LES on, looping is off by default, so you can reshape MIDI clips without them going all loopy on you. Often in Ableton, I would want to duplicate or paste over new sections, but if the copied selection had gaps or silences in it, like with vocal chops, then it would just merge together, which is not what I wanted. But now, if you hit, it replaces the section with the gaps as well. Yay! Alt plus E swaps to the MIDI envelope box. Right shift plus L adds a marker. And our latest feature, by popular request, use Control plus W to close a plugin, and Control Alt plus W to close all the plugins. Yeah. But the coolest new feature is our menu system. Now, instead of having to look through the maze of your browser to find that one plugin you're looking for, just double right click and bam. This shows a bunch of instruments and effects that you can add instantly to your projects. This makes it so much easier and quicker than going into plugins and effects and looking for that one plugin somewhere. It's also really easy to make your own menu, allowing you to add your own custom plugins or effects, even effects racks and presets. So it's fully customizable just by going into the menu config options. By default, there are two submenus, instruments and effects. Let's say you wanted to add massive to the list of instruments. You can write massive on one line and then massive VST on the second line. The first line is what shows up on the menu. The second line is what it searches up in the browser and adds them. The VST will help specifically find massive and not some preset called massive. This is the same for the effects submenu. And if you want to have something in neither menu but below because you use it super frequently, then there's no menu where you can do that. You can also change the names or add a new menu like this. You don't have to just use plugins either. If you have an effect rack or even a sample or something that you use a lot, then you can add that as well. You can also add separators if you want. This works for submenus as well. Once you added something to the menu config, then you just need to open and close the menu once, and then it will be there automatically, so you don't need to restart the script. Nasker found a site that converts an image to text, which makes it a whole lot easier to put a list of plugins into the menu. The plugins all add automatically to the session, but if you don't want that, then there's an option to turn that off. There's a big options list to change preferences. But wait, there's more. There's a whole suite of piano roll functions you can do now too. Double right-clicking in the piano roll opens up a new menu. This menu lets you quickly select chords and scales, and by holding down the tilde button, you can place these in the piano roll. Holding the tilde button down lets you even adjust how long you want them. Just regularly holding down the tilde button will let you instantly place notes as well, without having to double-click or use the pen tool. And if you use shift with the tilde button, then you can use the same chord multiple times. Here's a cool trick. Add a scale and then fold the piano roll so that only the scale notes show up. Then use our special fold chords. That way you'll get a combination of chords that all stay in one key. If you're using a foreign keyboard, some of these shortcuts may not work, like using the tilde button. But there are a few YouTube links in the settings.ini file that explain how to fix this. So that's going to be in the description. We worked a lot of time on this. We even got custom logos and everything. We worked a lot on this project, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on it, if you like it, if you use it in your setup. So how much is this amazing program going to cost you? $100? $50? No, it's completely free. Just go on our website, follow us, it'll start downloading. All we ask is that you use it, share it with your friends, or anybody you think you'll be able to use this, and we hope you enjoy it. Now you have no excuse for making bad music. Well, that's the
Live Enhancement Suite.
However, there's another script that I use, and Mac users will be able to use this one too. Probably even have a better time than Windows users. The Windows users will have to use my convoluted workaround. See, the script was really made for Mac. This script is a MIDI remote script. It allows you to do stuff that normal MIDI mappings don't let you do. The script that I'll be using is called Select Track Control. The main feature is that whenever you have a track that you're selected on, you can control it. Basically, what I wanted this for was to use the solo function. So let's say you're working on a synth sound and just want to hear what it sounds like on its own, then bam, it's in solo now. And I don't even need to go looking for that solo button or anything. It can do other stuff too, like muting and changing the volume of that selected track you're on. The whole list is here. Because this is a MIDI script, it takes MIDI as an input, but maybe you don't have a MIDI keyboard or don't want to sacrifice the one that you do have just for extra shortcuts. Well, why can't we use the typing keyboard? And you can. For Mac users out there, there's a program called Key MIDI, and it'll make your typing keyboard send out those MIDI notes too, but you can still use it normally as a normal typing keyboard as well. So for Mac users, it's really easy. Unfortunately, that program doesn't exist for Windows. And man, the workaround isn't pretty. So I'd probably just stop watching the video here. I think it's been a good video so far. I don't want to taint the reputation of my collaborators with what's about to come. If you like the enhancement treatment, then I'll definitely go check that out. Thank you for watching the video. Oh, you're still here. Okay, well, I guess I'll talk about how to add this script on Windows then. See, you can install the MIDI script on Windows. That's not a problem. So if you have an extra MIDI device to spare for shortcuts, you could also use that. That would be fantastic. But I wanted that keyboard ability, especially after having used Key MIDI on a Mac. I needed to find a way to send MIDI notes from the typing keyboard. I tried using a virtual MIDI piano and then linking notes to keystrokes. That only would work when it was in focus, so it wasn't really helpful. Anyways, the answer was AutoHotkey. It always comes back to AutoHotkey, doesn't it? There exists a script to send and also receive MIDI. It's super complicated. I'm not even going to pretend to fully understand this, but it seemed like it could work. Except I couldn't even download it because the links were down. So I kind of gave up for a while. But then I found an ImageLine forum page. Somebody had it and re-uploaded it. So I finally opened it up and, oh god, what is this? What do I do? Why is this? Oh! Here's how it works. You open up generic MIDI program 06. This activates all the other scripts. And it also activates this MIDI monitor thing. I don't know if it's going to be the same for you, but for me, these are all like Chinese characters. And not even actual words, just random characters. But essentially, it's asking for a MIDI input and output. Unfortunately, you can't just send the MIDI to Ableton, so you need to make a virtual MIDI port. I use Loop MIDI. There are others that also do the same, but this works fine. From AutoHotkey, you have to send it to Loop MIDI port. You're going to have to guess which one that is, because there's no understanding this. So I just hope you have a few of these and not like 10 or 20 of them. Otherwise, you're going to have to do a lot of trial and error. Fortunately, you can test to see if the MIDI messages are coming in, so that's very helpful. Then, once it's coming into loop MIDI, it's pretty simple. You enable loop MIDI as the input for select track control, and yes, now your keyboard is sending MIDI. I've changed the auto hotkey script to only work inside Ableton, so outside you'll still be able to use this as a normal typing keyboard. If you're using my script, then I've only set up 3 buttons to send MIDI, and it's the only ones that I really wanted, which is to solo it, mute it, and arm it. But there's a whole list of actual functions that it can do. It's just that you need to add that in for each MIDI note, which was way too much effort. If you want to change that, then you're going to have to go into the script and learn how this all works, because yeah. Once you have this all sorted out, though, it should just work, and you don't have to reset it with each startup. That being said, sometimes you might have to just for weird random reasons. There used to be less MIDI devices once upon a time, but now more have just appeared over time, so I would have to find the right one again. Maybe take a snapshot of which is the right combination of characters, just so you don't lose it. Also, once my loop MIDI port just stopped working, so I made a new one, and the old one started working again. So, okay, great. The way I coded it is also so it only works in Ableton 10, so you'd have to change some stuff for it to work in Ableton 9. I know, it's not pretty. Please don't judge me for this. It does work nicely once you get it to work. That being said, the Mac users, they definitely have the easier path on this one. Okay, well that's really all that I have to say, I think so. If there's other great tricks that I haven't covered, leave them in the comments. Otherwise, I want to thank everybody who worked on the
Live Enhancement Suite.
And I want to thank you, yes you, who's watching this, for being a subscriber, because I know by now you've definitely hit that subscribe button, and also that bell button, and that like button, and the love button. Thank you so much. You're amazing. I will call it a day. See you later, tribe.